Good evening, boys and girls. It is currently 1 in the morning while I am filming this, and that is because it has been a very long day, very busy. I only got home at after 10, and then bottom line is, as you can see behind me, I got some more shelving here for my Blu-rays. There's one immediately off camera as well. I got them off of Facebook Marketplace. And so yeah, there's a nice circular pattern for all the various movies and stuff. But yeah, it's 1 in the morning, and I just wanted to knock out this video here, give you guys an update, and because, well, it's going to take me a while to go to sleep anyway, so I might as well knock this out while it's on my mind. But first, let us pop a top of the drink of Unboxing Champion, shall we? Even though there's caffeine, this is gonna keep me awake even longer, but that's okay, because I do it all for you. Alright, so, few updates. So you remember the family video one that I did last time, and how the one that's nearest to me, how they were closing down, which is still the case, and I feel very sad for them, but there's one near my new job, and I thought I saw on an Instagram ad or something that it was closing down as well, except I went in there and everything appeared to be alive and well, and the person that was working there said that she hadn't heard anything about any kind of closures or anything, so hopefully that means that it is alive and well, because I don't want them to close. I want the video store to be alive and well in whatever form, and it seems like Family Video has managed to endure, while Blockbuster has not, and so yeah, I don't want them to be closed. But one thing I will say is that despite the fact that they are alive and well, I did find a small selection of movies there that were 2 for $3 to buy. Now, most of their selection, not surprisingly, was exclusively rentals, because, well, that's their primary business, but there were certain ones that were labeled as being for sale, and because they're alive and well, it's not like the other one where everything had to go, so the selection was less. There were fewer titles to choose from, but I managed to find a good spread of 2 for $3 ones, and so I came away with 8 films, so it was actually a good way to similarly, expand the collection without a great cost. So let's dive in, shall we? First up is, and keep in mind, none of these have the slips. Almost all of these do have slips, but I do know how to get them separately. First up is Army of One with our dear Nicolas Cage and Russell Brand, and apparently this is based on... Is this based on a true story? I don't know. It says, one man's wildly true quest to capture Osama bin Laden, which I guess that it was based on a true story. I'll have to make sure that's the case, but anyway, yeah, Army of One, and in my quest to get the rest of Nicolas Cage's filmography. Now, again, because it's from Family Video, it only has the Blu-ray, not the DVD. That part doesn't really bother me as much as, well, getting the slipcover, but I do know where to find it. Next up is a film that I remembered seeing in theaters. I have not seen it since theaters. I would like to revisit it, and I'm Facebook friends with one of the screenwriters, and that is Big Eyes, the very underrated, very not Tim Burton-y in its look and feel Tim Burton film about a real-life artist. It was painter Walter Keane and Margaret, except that, guess what? Walter Keane had gotten all the credit for this kitsch art for the big-eyed, kind of sad, dejected children, except that it was actually his wife who was the true artist, and, she had to endure, a bunch of legal battles and stuff to basically emancipate herself from this person who, became pretty tyrannical. But anyway, I want to watch it again because it's been such a long time. And yeah, it's Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, I believe that's how you say it, and I'm Facebook friends with him. Same screenwriting team that wrote Ed Wood, which is hands down Tim Burton's best film. So it was a good reteaming of that great director and writer duo team. So yeah, pretty cool. Next up is a later period Mel Gibson film, Bloodfather, which I heard good things about. I think I can probably track this slipcover down pretty easily. And yeah, don't know anything about it, but eager to check it out. Got it for cheap. Daniel Radcliffe is in this film, Imperium, which I believe he's like an undercover cop trying to infiltrate like a neo-Nazi group, or like a whatever, neo-Nazi racist skinhead, white power, whatever it is. But anyway, yeah, so it seems like after Harry Potter that Daniel Radcliffe has tried to go kind of off the beaten path with his role choices, which is good. I mean, he and the rest of the Harry Potter kids, at this point, they could pretty much just buy. You could probably take their whole salary from the various movies and go and like buy Kenya for all, for all we know. For all we know, that's what could happen, and they could just, purchase like an entire country and just be a country of one and just retire. Who knows? I know it was Rupert Grint who he got like that ice cream truck and seems to be content with doing that. Next up is a movie called Serena with Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence. They reteamed after having done Silver Linings Playbook together and having gotten along really well. And the disc is actually in the Blu-ray player, but it is here. This does have a slip, and I do know where to find it, so I'll get it eventually. But this is a film that apparently it did not get good critical reviews. I don't really know why. I started watching it, and I liked it so far. I'm still very early on in it, but based on a book, and it's actually set in the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina, which is pretty sweet. Set there, but I guess it was filmed in like the Czech Republic, which weird, but I guess it's probably cheaper to film there. But yeah, and I guess that it was Jennifer Lawrence, I guess, was cast first, and she specifically recommended Bradley Cooper because they got along so well with Silver Linings Playbook. Next up, this is one that I wanted to get as soon as I saw the cover. This would have been years ago, but I never found a good price point for it until now, and it's a movie called This Must Be the Place, starring Sean Penn. And I looked on the back of this and I was like, Sean Penn looks like Robert Smith from The Cure, and it's about him like trying to go and like upon discovering his father's unfulfilled quest for revenge against an ex-Nazi war criminal taking refuge in America. So he's going to basically track that person down. So it's essentially like Robert Smith versus an ex-Nazi war criminal, I guess. I'm there. Next up, I'm trying to find the slip for this. It's actually harder than you'd think, but it's the sequel to Unfriended called Unfriended Dark Web, and I like the first Unfriended. I don't really get the hate behind it, but again, I like found footage films a lot more than most people do. I particularly liked Unfriended because I thought that the technique was done in a fresh way, at least as far as theatrical films are concerned. I'd seen, there was an episode of Modern Family that did the kind of video chat format for the whole thing, for the whole episode. I'd seen that done, but in a feature film and in a horror film, I thought that it was done well, and brought some new life to the form. Now this one, I guess, touches on the dark web, so eager to check that out. Which, let me tell you, you don't really need to make up a whole lot about the dark web for it to be scary, because it's plenty scary on its own. And then, last but not least for family video anyway, is, so I have the original Wolf Creek on Steelbook from Zavvi, which is a Region 2 only, but this is Wolf Creek 2. The only one that we got on Blu-ray in the US for some reason. But yeah, I haven't even watched the first one yet, but it is, I've heard great things that it's kind of batshit crazy Australian horror, so there you go. Horror / thriller. But anyway, so that is it for family video, but I had to kill some time between getting off of work and picking up the two Blu-ray shelves off of Facebook Marketplace, and had to kill time between that and going to a script reading group that I'm involved with, a table read. And so I chilled out at 2nd and Charles because it was on the way. And I stumbled upon several hard-to-find or out-of-print horror Blu-rays because, well, this is a horror channel. Gotta always be expanding and refining the horror section, of course, beyond just these two. So what do we got? Well, let's start with one of the easier ones to find, but I was shocked at how much I loved this film, and I mean I loved this film, and that was Crawl. I really didn't, like, I remembered when this came out, I didn't see it in the theaters or anything, and I was like, so what? Like, I'm always kind of baffled with some of these, you know, either shark movies or crocodiles or whatever, alligators. I'm always surprised and impressed or whatever when, because there's a ton of these kinds of movies made on the indie film level, or like a Sci-Fi Channel original movie and stuff. There's a ton of those that, you know, could never hope to get a theatrical release. You know, at best they could get on Sci-Fi, or they could, you know, do halfway decent, you know, on DVD or whatever. Very rarely do they ever make it to the big screen and get, like, a big push or anything like that. So when, like, The Shallows, when The Meg, when this, you know, when these all, you know, got the big screen treatment, I was like, you know, how is that? What sets these apart from the others? Well, it's because, well, not only did they tend to have, like, a higher caliber of, like, actors or people behind the camera, or both of those things, you know, budget, whatever. Not only that, but the scripts for those films were all really good, and I have to say, Crawl has by far and away the best script of those three that I just named. And why is that? Well, here's the thing. So any aspiring screenwriting students out there, whether they're interested in the horror genre or not, I would highly recommend checking this out as a good modern example of good screenwriting in terms of pacing, in terms of characters being fleshed out via what, as they say in screenwriting, character is as character does, and this is a really good example of that. It's a good example of how to keep a story moving without having to over-rely on exposition or anything. We know exactly what we need to know when we need to know it. There's quite a lot of tension. The main character is a fantastic blend of being clever and resourceful without being invincible, or without making mistakes, or without having to rise above a challenge that would befuddle anyone, you know, or would be very, very difficult for anyone. So in other words, it's not, you don't fall into either stereotype of the, you know, the Mary Sue that's like, you know, overly smart or overly powerful or whatever, nor do you fall into the stereotype of the damsel in distress or anything like that. You get someone that is clever and is capable, and the whole story is about her having to basically confront the harder parts of her past and essentially grow as a person in the midst of crisis, which this is set during a hurricane that, on top of being extremely violent and destructive, also unleashes, mass flooding and alligators from a nearby alligator farm onto, all throughout the neighborhood. And so it's all of that in the midst of this pretty horrific natural disaster and these, kind of crazed wild animals on top of that. So there's a lot at stake, but it never feels like it's too much, like it couldn't happen. If anything, I think this is probably one of the most grounded kind of animal exploitation slash, carnivorous animals on the loose kind of movies. It's probably one of the most grounded ones I think that's ever been made. And again, the character, I think, her name is Haley. So they set up her character remarkably well, remarkably quickly. And again, you can agree or disagree with whether or not it's smart to go looking for her kind of estranged father in the midst of a hurricane. You can argue whether that's, courageous or whether that's dumb or whatever. But the character's motivations, her stubbornness, her tenacity, her resourcefulness, but also her, not always heeding warnings, all of those traits are beautifully well established quickly and economically so that we know that this person feels well-rounded and that we don't have to waste a ton of time getting to know what we need to know about the character in order to feel like this person's a real person or like we can get behind her. So, behind her struggle. And so, highly recommend this film. It's thematically, it's a great film about someone like confronting the harder to deal with parts of her past or having to kind of learn what she was, remember what she was taught as a child, but be able to put it to use during an extremely hard time as a young adult. And it was Alexander Aja, I guess is how you say it, but he directed The Hills Have Eyes remake and Piranha 3D, and producer Sam Raimi, of course, of Evil Dead and Spider-Man fame. Highly recommend it. I don't know why it didn't get the 4K treatment, but any way you slice it, highly recommend this film, especially if you want to see a good modern example of how to extract tension out of every scene while also providing a really good example of character is as character does, and just tight economic pacing, really clear characterization, all the really great things that I will want to cover in a commentary track for No Money Film School. In fact, I wouldn't mind doing a commentary track for this because, again, there's a lot more about the craft of screenwriting to dive into, which I don't necessarily think that a lot of people would think that based on the kind of film that this is, but it did get good reviews, and I think it did pretty well at the box office. But I really say again, I think if you want to learn good contemporary screenwriting, this is a great example. So yeah, sorry I spent so much time on that, but I just really love the film, and I didn't necessarily think I would. I didn't think I'd dislike it, but I didn't know I would hold it to that high esteem. But there you go. Anyway, next up is Green Room, which was also quite critically acclaimed. And this one, so we had neo-Nazis in, regular Nazis in This Must Be the Place. And then here, we've got neo-Nazis, and, white supremacists, etc. You got, this traveling band, this indie rock band, or punk band, actually, traveling the country in their broken down van. They get a gig through someone that they don't know very well. It's this backwoods kind of club place, and it's actually a neo-Nazi place. That's owned by this particularly, backwoodsy, but also particularly kind of almost cultish / criminal enterprise, which is the head of it is Patrick Stewart. And you would think he'd have his standard British accent, but he doesn't. You can tell he's clearly trying to suppress it. Like, it doesn't sound completely convincing, but it also, you know, he doesn't have to talk all that frequently, you know, and he actually gets to play a rare villainous role, and he does a really good job with it. But this film has the late great Anton Yelchin, Imogen Poots, and Patrick Stewart, of course. And you could call it a, well, horror film slash thriller. I think it might kind of lean a bit more towards a thriller, but any way you slice it, it's a good one. I think the only things I'd say, well, actually, I don't know if this is the correct pronunciation, but Alia Shawkat from Arrested Development, she played Maybe on that show. She's in here as well, and she does a very good job. I'm glad that she was in this because I always liked her on Arrested Development. I just wanted to see her get more prominent roles, and this was a good example of that. And again, Anton Yelchin had such a great career ahead of him, and his life was just cut drastically short by a really dumb auto accident from a stationary car that I guess it was like the whatever that was, the emergency brake didn't work, rolled over him and killed him. And it was like, well, what are the odds of that? You know, it wasn't like a you know, conventional car accident like a drunk driver. It wasn't anything like that. It was just one of those once in a blue moon kind of things, and it's just so tragic. But anyway, great film. He did leave plenty of good films in his wake, and I just realized he played Chekhov in the Kelvin timeline reboot of Star Trek, the film series, and then of course you had Captain Picard there from Next Generation. So how cool is that? But yeah, definitely worth a watch. Found it with the slip. Yeah, very, very good film. It and again, it just kind of shows you just all of the really nutty slash criminal slash, you know, terrifying people that are kind of out in backwoodsy areas, whether neo-Nazi or whatever they are. You know, they could be meth dealers, they could be any number of things. There's a lot of meth production in rural areas, and I believe that the foundation for this particular group of neo-Nazis that they I do believe that their primary source of income is drug dealing, if I recall. But anyway, great film. Next up, controversial film time. Oh boy. Now this film that I'm about to show you, this was actually Roger Ebert's most hated film out of any film that he ever reviewed. What on earth could that possibly be? It is the original, whatever this was, 1978 version of I Spit on Your Grave. And this is by far and away one of the most controversial films ever made. I haven't even seen it yet, but I will. But I picked this up specifically because this is actually a very hard to find Blu-ray. You would be surprised. Now, Anchor Bay was basically folded into Lionsgate. And so they, as an entity, don't really exist anymore. They were acquired, and they're just kind of, you know, they don't exist. But this particular release, I assume because it was so controversial then and now, I assume that the release of it was perhaps short-lived, and that's why it's so rare and expensive, but I managed to find it. Now, the remake series is comparatively easy to track down, but not the original for some reason. And I do want to get the remake series, but anyway, this film is extremely controversial. Sorry for nudging the camera. Because it is a prototypical, what has been known as a rape revenge film, which that has become kind of a subgenre of exploitation films. And actually the alternate title to this film is Day of the Woman. And it's by a one-hit wonder director, Meir Zarchi. And it was Roger Ebert, and I love the fact that they put his quote on the back. I always love it whenever they put, like, contemptible or, like, bad reviews or whatever. I like it, actually, when they use those as strengths, because it was actually David Lynch got that with Lost Highway. He actually, put the 2 thumbs down rating that Siskel and Ebert gave it. He's called those 2 reasons to go see Lost Highway, and I'm like, yeah, he gets it. He does. But anyway, I think the people that put this out, they get it too, because it says, Roger Ebert, Chicago Sun-Times, sick, reprehensible, and contemptible. This movie is an expression of the most diseased and perverted, darker human natures. Which, if that's not a glowing endorsement, I don't know what is. This is from Horror News. It stands alone as one of the most controversial films ever made. This is a piece of cinematic history to witness for yourself and make your own decisions, which you should approach every film like that, not just controversial ones, but especially controversial ones. And why is it so controversial? Well, the whole concept of a rape revenge film, which again, it's not exclusive to this, and in fact, the Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2, they take quite a lot of inspiration from rape revenge films because, well, that happens to the bride. She is, it's even beyond that. She's, almost killed, put into a coma for years, betrayed by her own people, and, she is raped while in a coma. Her baby, she was pregnant at the time, she is led to believe that it is, that it didn't live, even though it did. Spoiler alert. But, so Tarantino actually kind of upped the ante on that. But for this one, this is one of the earliest examples of the genre. And this film, it's notorious because, well, that's kind of a touchy subject, not surprisingly. But also because the actual rape scene is, and again, I haven't seen the film, but from what I understand, it's possibly the most, one of, if not the most. I think Irreversible from 2002 might actually, hold a candle to it as far as like graphicness and intensity. The actual rape scene goes on for like an insanely long amount of time and is just unrelentingly brutal, and it's something that, well, anybody that's been through that kind of experience or something similar or whatever, I'm sure it wouldn't be the best thing to watch for you if you're not emotionally prepared for it. And again, this is uncut, uncensored, and it says uncut, uncensored, and still unprecedented. But the thing is, and I think Roger Ebert didn't really get this about the film. A couple things. We're not meant to sympathize with the rapists, and the whole film is about this woman, getting revenge on her rapists and killing them one by one, trying to get, as Tarantino would say, kind of paying back blood for blood, and, just classic revenge film formula. So not only that, we're not meant to sympathize with it, it just happens to be incredibly violent and brutal to make its point effectively, and I think you could argue very much that it does. It's just more so of like, well, can you handle that sort of thing? And, I'm always of the opinion that in order to make something stick, something that you really care about, and something that is as serious as, rape and sexual assault and, sexual violence of all kinds, anything that has that much gravity to it, you do need to, well, A, take it seriously, but B, convey the horrors of it sufficiently and not hold back, because I think holding back does a disservice to the horrific realities of that kind of horrific event or that horrific action. And, to dilute it in any way, I think, would do a tremendous disservice to how severe those kinds of things really are in real life. Because, again, as hard as they are to see, whether real or staged, and there's no doubt at all that they are hard to see, it's never a good idea to hide from or sugarcoat reality, especially unpleasant reality. But of course, it all depends on how it's done. Some people said that it was exploitive. Some people said that it, conveyed the horrible realities of that kind of thing. And I like what the quote on the back was, that, you witness it and you make your own decisions, which that is how you should view any work of art. But one thing that should be said is that Mir Zarchi, this film was actually based on a real event that he witnessed. Now, it was more like the aftermath of an event that he didn't witness. But here's what happened. So he and someone else, they were driving along, and I believe that they came across a woman who had been sexually assaulted very violently. And in other words, not only was she raped, and all of the violence associated with the violence and trauma associated with that act, but she was also horrifically beaten. And they, I guess, tried to take her to the hospital, and the kind of negligence and horrible treatment that she was given, despite being a rape victim, and a really horrible a horrible looking one, a horrible example of how bad that sort of thing can go, and just how much damage someone can inflict upon a person, and just physically, let alone the trauma that's associated with that. And he was Mir Zarchi was so shocked and, in his own way, traumatized by just the mistreatment that this person received, the lack of justice, the lack of society rallying behind someone like this, that he expressed himself of how he felt about that in an extremely, powerful, violent, way that people are still debating to this day. Did it go too far? Was it exploitive? Was it effective? What was it? And but I do think that's a very important thing to throw in there, because without knowing that, I think one would be inclined to believe the exploitive, perspective on it. And again, you could argue that it still is exploitive even with that knowledge, but I do think that's very important, because authorial intent is incredibly important whenever you're talking about controversial films and something as sensitive as sexual assault and rape and everything. I personally think that knowing that it came from a very personal experience, I think that says a lot. And also just the fact that a film can convey the horrors of something as horrific as rape in a way that really hits you in the intended way. It doesn't sugarcoat, it doesn't pull punches, it doesn't try to cater to sensitivities at the expense of conveying the horrific realities of that act. I think that's quite courageous filmmaking. I think that's courageous artistry. That's what art should do. Art should always be trying to push the envelope, always should be trying to convey that which people don't know if they can handle, or they don't want to hear, or it's something important that should be said. And especially in 1978, we didn't have anywhere near the network for survivors of sexual assault, or anywhere near the levels of societal support for people that have gone through that we do now. And thank God that we have that. Thank God that we have ways to protect people and to help them after having gone through such a thing. But again, but also, be glad that someone, in a time when that wasn't the case, be glad that someone had the courage to convey the horrors of that kind of thing, so that positive change in the real world could take place. So, yeah, there you go. But again, see the movie for yourself if you can find it, and judge for yourself. I certainly will. I just know that tends to be my perspective whenever a film touches on anything controversial or sensitive, assuming that the author's, the artist's, intention is right, that his or her heart is in the right place, that they're doing it for the right reasons, all that stuff. It's, I think art can speak to the horrors of this world in a way that can really get people's attention if it's done right, and can help bring about that positive societal change that we all want, in a way that a nonfiction either work or essay or a whatever speech couldn't. But anyway, yeah, that's my perspective on that kind of thing. Next up, this is a film that everybody has seen. Everyone loves this film, more or less. And yet, for whatever reason, it seems to have gone out of print on Blu-ray. I don't know why. And so it can command kind of unrealistically high prices relative to what it usually would go for back when it wasn't out of print. And that was actually the American version of The Ring. I know. You wouldn't think that this film would be out of print. And yet it seems to be, at least on Blu-ray. I do not know why, because I remembered seeing this, in Target in the $5 section back when they, hadn't decimated their Blu-ray section. I remember seeing it for $5, and it was, as common could be. Now I know that, it says Paramount, DreamWorks, it's got the Warner Brothers logo there. That's when, Paramount and Warner Brothers, when they were putting out a lot of Paramount releases on Blu-ray, and then that deal expired, and then all those releases, they went out of print, and they got really expensive. I assume it was the same kind of thing here, and maybe they just didn't put this back into Blu-ray print, I don't know. It's easy to find on DVD, like an original, at the time, home video release, and just a contemporary one. So DVD, clearly, they circulated out there, and it's really easy to find. For whatever reason, on Blu-ray, this thing can get rather expensive relative to what it should be going for, and I do not know why, but I can only speculate. Anyway, the film itself. I like Ringu better, the original Japanese version. And why is that? Well, because I think that Ringu had a little bit more to say about Japan at the time, about the kind of differences between the Tokyo kind of urbanites and the more rural Japan, especially on some of the smaller islands and off the coast of a big city like Tokyo, which Tokyo has a massive metro area on top of the city itself. Just the wide circle of the metro area is massive, and it takes up much of the central part of the country, actually, to the point where there's a rather stark difference between how not just advanced but futuristic almost Tokyo is in its technology and its look and its feel, and then how rural parts of Japan outside of it can be. So it's a rather stark contrast, but I think the original Ringu had a lot to say about those kinds of things, as well as it made the kind of psychic abilities connection between Sadako, Samara, in the American remake, the psychic power connection between her and her mother made that a lot more clear, plus having it was more of a connection between that, and also there was a volcano, and it was all these things that I felt like it told a more complete story. And because this American remake, I think visually it's more striking, because it's got Gore Verbinski behind the camera, and he's always been a really good visual filmmaker. I like the kind of icky colors of this film. I think Aiden is quite a bit creepier as a creepy child in comparison to the child in Ringu. But I think it's just more so that Ringu tells a more complete story. I feel like this one, at least for me, I can't say the same for everyone else. Every time I watch this film, I'm always kind of left disappointed and underwhelmed, because I feel like it doesn't resolve, and I don't need everything wrapped up in a nice neat little bow at the end, but I feel like it leaves too many threads unresolved within its own context to be a satisfying experience. And if anything, I felt like The Ring 2 helped tie up some loose ends of this. I think it did some interesting things. And Rings was kind of, it wasn't horrible. It was just kind of unnecessary. And I have not seen the other ones of the original Japanese series, but I do want to do that when I get that Arrow set or whatever. But, this is one that everybody talks about, and I managed to find it for a halfway decent price, so I thought, just put that in the collection again. But yeah, I'll be honest, for whatever reason, I'm always left disappointed whenever I watch this film, like I'm missing something, or like they just didn't resolve enough things to really make it a satisfying experience. And that happens sometimes where films just they leave too many threads unresolved to the point where the overall narrative does not feel satisfying. And I love Spider-Man in general, and I liked a lot of things about The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, but they were both so busy and so concerned with trying to build up a world and try to create a competing cinematic universe to the MCU prior to their signing an agreement to share the rights of Spider-Man, that too many plot threads got left unresolved to where the movie just kind of stops rather than concluding, and it makes it just not satisfying as a film. And I feel like The Ring has a little bit of that as well. That could just be me, though. I know a lot of people love it, but I personally like Ringu more. Anyway, last one. I don't know why this isn't on Blu-ray. This would actually, I think, be a good candidate for a Criterion release or a Scream Factory release, or an Arrow, or a something. But it is a highly underrated film, Shadow of the Vampire, starring John Malkovich and Willem Dafoe. Absolutely love this film. It is a film done by E. Elias, how do you say his name? E. Elias Murhow. I don't know how you say it, but anyway, he was kind of a cult director because he did a movie called Begotten, and he did a bunch of music videos, like he did some Marilyn Manson videos in the 90s, and his career didn't really ever take off in films all that much, except for this one, which got a lot of praise, and I think is an extremely good horror film. Not only horror film, but it's more of like an alternate history / movie about filmmaking itself, because basically what it is, it's a kind of historical fiction piece, but it's about F.W. Murnau, played by John Malkovich, making Nosferatu. But the difference is that in this film's universe, F.W. Murnau hires, Willem Dafoe plays Max Schreck, and in this movie's universe, what happens is that F.W. Murnau hires Max Schreck to play the vampire, but he ends up hiring a real vampire. And from what I understand, it's not too far off from what actually happened. I mean, there's certain things about it that are obviously not known because it was such a long time ago, but almost 100 years ago, if you can believe that. And I believe that the real Max Schreck was kind of a mysterious figure, but obviously he wasn't a vampire. But bottom line was there was enough ambiguity surrounding the making of that film and surrounding Max Schreck himself to where such a thing, the rumors of such a thing could have arisen. So what's cool is that they do a lot of brilliant recreations of the actual making of Nosferatu. Very faithful, very, very well done. The makeup is extremely good. I believe I can't remember if it got a Best Makeup nomination, but I know for sure Willem Dafoe, he got a Best Supporting Actor nomination at the Oscars, which is quite something because horror films almost never get Oscar attention. And to this day, Willem Dafoe is the only actor to ever be nominated for an Oscar for playing a vampire, which is a big deal, I think. Yeah, he very faithfully embodies Max Schreck as Count Orlok, and highly recommend this film. I absolutely adore John Malkovich, absolutely adore Willem Dafoe. I just think it's an exceptional film. I wish it got more attention. I wish that it had... it says nominated for 2 Academy Awards, one of which I believe was makeup, and, of course, Willem Dafoe. Highly, highly recommend this film. I wish that it would get a super-duper Blu-ray release, preferably through whatever, Scream Factory, Criterion, Arrow, something. In this film, so this was a Lionsgate release, and it actually says Saturn Films on the back here, which is actually Nicolas Cage's film production company, which is pretty sweet. He was one of the producers, produced by Nicolas Cage, which is really sweet. And because he's a big horror fan and a big Nosferatu fan. Anyone that's seen Vampire's Kiss will know that right away. But yeah, very faithfully recreated. One of my favorite films about filmmaking, and one of my favorite vampire films. It's just such a unique fusion. And, it recreates my favorite period for filmmaking, which is German Expressionism in the 1920s. So, yeah, that's it for this haul. Hopefully that gave you a little something to hold you over until the next big, I don't even know what it's going to be. I pre-ordered a bunch of new releases that are going to come out in September, October. And, again, going to work out what I want that first commentary track to be. And, hopefully you'll find it valuable / interesting. But, yeah, if you like this, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon, set phasers to stun, warp factor 5. It's probably almost 2 at this point in the morning. And I've got work the next day, in actually a few hours, but, and who knows how long I'm going to take to go to sleep, who knows how long I will stay asleep, I don't know, but bottom line, I will finish off the drink of Unboxing Champions, and I will see you in the next video. Good night, boys and girls, stay safe.